Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar focusing on making education work in secure settings during the COVID-19 crisis. My name is Mike Dempsey. I'm the Executive Director for the Council of Juvenile Justice Administrators. Today's webinar features David Domenici, who's the Director of the Center for Education Excellence in Alternative Settings, and a team of educational experts and practitioners offering insights on how to best maintain educating students held in secure settings during these challenging times. I want to thank all the panelists for their dedication and hard work and commitment to educating students in juvenile justice systems and to their work in putting together this webinar. Special thanks also to David Domenici for taking a leading role in bringing this webinar to life. For those of you who are new to CJJA, we were formed in 1994 as a national nonprofit organization focused on improvement of local juvenile correctional services, juvenile justice programs, and practices so youth within the system succeed when they return to the community. This time I'm going to turn it over to Charity Brunstall, who is our program coordinator, to bring some technical tips and housekeeping measures to you all. Charity.
Good afternoon, everyone. Please close any open applications you may have on your computers. Please use the audio option through your phone. Everyone will be muted. You may type questions anytime in the question box, and questions will be answered during the Q&A session at the end of the webinar. The webinar is being recorded, so a link to the audio recording and the PowerPoint presentation will be sent following the webinar, as well as any handouts that are attached. And at this time, I'm going to hand it over to our moderator, David Domenici.
Thank you, Charity. I'm really glad to be here and glad to be able to facilitate this discussion today. We have a great panel today. We have Dan Wynn, who's the lead teacher at the Miami Youth Academy, Adam Johnson, the Director of Juvenile Justice Education with the North Carolina Department of Public Safety, Clarice Mendoza Davis from the Maya Angelou Schools, Woody Cliff, the Director of DEOA Education for the Collaborative for Education in Massachusetts, and we have Christy Sampson Kelly and Michelle Williams, the Director of School and the Site Superintendent from New Orleans, who are going to be joining us. The webinar is broken up into 3 sections, and the first section has 3 speakers. In this first section, Dan, then Adam, and then Clarice are going to each speak for a few minutes to try to give a glimpse of what they are doing in collaboration with their secure care partners right now today to make education work. 3 quick notes. These providers represent, to some degree, the range of differences that exist in this space in providing education. Dan is with Miami-Dade County Public Schools, so he is a school district employee working inside of a pretrial detention facility. Adam Johnson works directly for the North Carolina Department of Public Safety, which has their own educational division, which is fairly common for state post-adjudication agencies. And Clarice works with the Maya Angelou Schools, which is a nonprofit providing educational services to the District of Columbia. In addition, each of the 3 presenters in this first section offer glimpses in modestly different approaches to making education work, to some degree based on their technological infrastructure and practices prior, and to some degree based on the pragmatics day-to-day of doing whatever they can to make education work. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Dan. For the rest of the presentation, the speakers are simply going to introduce each other, and I will join you in about 40 minutes. Dan, you're up.
Okay, thanks, David. So at Miami Youth Academy, about 3 years ago, we introduced a hybrid model of education we had migrated from a teacher-directed model, typically typified by lectures and typically desk work, to a Chromebook program where kids were working on individual devices from their own desks and having teacher support, and including lectures and some of the other typical things that you'd see in an instructional model. Dave's program really supported us in that as we went through a wide range of training and development and getting all the pieces in place in order to be able to introduce this hybrid model. As a consequence of that, we sort of had a head start on this distance learning platform. So what we do is teachers develop daily content, and they add that content into the Google. We have Google Classrooms that the teachers will set up. Right now, we generally use one classroom that's set up for distance learning, and everything is parked within that. Students then access that content through their individual Chromebooks, and the Chrome Administrative Console gives us a high level of security. We have, for example, we utilize, it's a Linux-based system that is inoculated to viruses and proxy servers. So it really gives us a great deal of security and allowing students to be able to access only the content that we allow. So teachers join the class every day. We have the same link, and it's accessible only if you come in with our domain or if you've been allowed access by one of the teachers in the class. So it prevents the possibility of any interlopers into our classroom environment. And the content that we provide is coordinated with all of the various Google tools that are integrated into the G Suite, but then we also integrate into other programs like Florida Ready to Work, which is a vocational and educational platform offered by the state of Florida, Reading Plus, some typing programs, and a variety of other things. Some of the successes that we've really identified from this model is that students really enjoy the autonomy of having an individual device. And the engagement, really, since we started this in 2017, the engagement was completely transformed. And the fact that we can introduce this with the distance learning really gives us a head start on the whole sense of students being engaged in their classwork. So our staff really gave us, in the way that we work, we have amazing staff support. From the perspective of the program staff at Miami Youth Academy, they're really nothing short of heroic. They've just been there every day providing tremendous support. They join a video conference in 2 different classrooms that allow access for students and teachers to join virtually. The staff have been asked to maintain this program under really difficult circumstances. The district personnel have been providing a tremendous amount of support to staff in a variety of ways, including gift cards for grocery for staff or food establishments. District, we also plan to do a lot of recognition of the staff to make sure that they're recognized for the tremendous efforts they put forth. The state Department of Education and the State Department of Juvenile Justice are really inseparable in terms of their guidance and support for educational programs in Florida. They've been very, very supportive and very committed to supporting every aspect of what we do. And we have a number of additional academic interventions that we have used at our program. We have an artist in residence program. We have a program with exchange with the University of Miami. We have a journalism program. All of those programs have been able to continue given our virtual classroom. And we've also been able to add additional programs, partly through staff from the center who've provided us with a care mail program to incorporate Bergen, Norway into our classroom. Some of the challenges that we've had, a lot of the challenges that we have in the classroom are similar to the challenge we had before distance learning. Behaviors, sometimes it's difficult for students they become reticent if they're asking questions in front of everybody on a digital platform. So that can be a challenge. We also have 4 students in isolation. They came up positive, and we end up For those students, we have to deliver paper-based content, and we also have 3 staff who've tested positive at the program. So there's some real challenges that we're facing in that respect. So I think, again, the heroic efforts of the staff have been really tremendous. If you go to the next slide, please. And in terms of serving the students, we give individually delivered content. So it's similar to what we did before the distance learning. There's no personal meetings with district. We do provide for personal meetings with district psychological staff, but we're concerned about confidentiality. So they generally speak about less personal issues if they're dealing with that, unless we're able to set up a personal meeting one-to-one with the psychological staff and the students. And there's a wide range of accommodations within this model that have allowed us to really address the needs of special education students. We allow for alternative modes of presentation, and English language learners have a lot of different opportunities within this platform that we've been able to deliver content to them in a linguistically appropriate format. In terms of the lessons learned, I can't say enough about the program staff in terms of their support for this model. It would be impossible without their support. And I think anybody who's addressing these issues in these secure care settings needs to recognize the support that they need from the staff that are there every day working, and we just really, really appreciate it. At our particular program, one of the things that we have emphasized as a part of the culture is that the education program is a cornerstone of the treatment. So anything that students do in the educational setting has a big impact on their treatment within the program. And as a consequence of that, there's always been a really great deal of collaboration between educational and treatment staff in terms of working toward meeting the needs of the students and the various aspects of the program. And it's really been, if you look at it historically, we've had tremendous success. And again, we wouldn't be this successful without the great collaboration. Moving forward, we will continue with this model, whether we're in distance learning or not. And there's probably going to be an expectation of this model continuing through June, at least the beginning of June or through June. And thereafter, we're really not clear about where we're going to go. But we really need to emphasize the importance of moving forward of hygiene and program, personal and program health. And our census has gone down because they've obviously blocked any new students coming in during this period of time, particularly in light of the fact that we have students who tested positive. So there will have to be a period of time when the census builds up following the crisis. But we've been very happy with this. The teachers, the team of teachers that we have, I can't say enough about how excellent they are and about the support that we receive from all different levels, from state, from local, from program, everywhere along has made this possible. So it's been very successful. So now I'd like to introduce my colleague from North Carolina, Adam Johnson.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. So my name is Adam Johnson. I'm the Director of Juvenile Education Services with the North Carolina Department of Public Safety. Within our system, just to give you a little bit of background, within our system, we have 7 state-operated juvenile detention centers, 4 youth development centers. Detention centers are housing our students who are awaiting court decisions, and our youth development centers are typically longer term, where students have already been committed to our system. We are considered our own local education agency under our North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. So we hire all our teachers and do everything, just about everything in-house. Pre-COVID-19, we were in the process of rebuilding our student network. So we were doing a lot of direct instruction and a lot of really low-tech, using a lot of low-tech resources, teacher-made items and things like that. Now that we're inside of the COVID-19 response, our teachers just recently have been pulled from the facilities to help limit the number of staff that we have going in and out of the facilities. and we just started that on April 13th. So we're just now into our second week of our distance learning program. And at most sites, we're providing what we consider a low-tech distance learning and teaching. Is we have very limited to no internet access for our students, although some sites do have some connectivity. You know, when we went into this, what we wanted to do is basically outline a minimum plan, and you know, what were our main objectives for this. And hopefully try to make it as short-term of a plan as possible. And some of the objectives we had, we tried to align it as close as we could to what our State Department of Instruction had for a lot of the traditional schools. We looked at that the work would have to be accessible by all students and be responsive to the individual student needs. It had to be consistent communication between the teacher and students, knowing that that might not always be in a face-to-face format, but they could be communicate either via phone if that was an option, or you know, when the teachers were coming on site and checking in with the students, providing that in writing as they respond to students' work on their assignments. All the assignments that teachers are providing are aligned with the appropriate grade level and content standards for the courses in which they're enrolled. It includes evidence of student learning, and it considers the whole child as well as the learning environment, knowing that each student is in a different place with their academic ability, and you know what each site will be able to do. For the most part, across the board, you know, most sites have their teachers, you know, reporting on site 1 to 2 times a week, where they are reviewing student work, updating, you know, the individualized package for the students, connecting with the staff that are helping facilitate the instruction during their absence, and then meeting with students as that's possible, and completing any other duties that have to be done on site because of access to different systems and programs. However, we do have some sites that, whether it's due to staffing or web access, that are able to leverage some other tools or resources, such as, you know, utilizing Microsoft Teams or some other virtual platform, to where they can actually come right in and do some virtual teaching, you know, from a location off site. And others can utilize some of our online courseware, and you know, depending on the staffing situation, can do some small group direct instruction as well too. And those sites that are doing the small group direct instruction are usually having 1 to 2 teachers come in per day, and do similar to like an AB alternate schedule for kids in the classes where they're enrolled. But the biggest thing is that each site's able to adapt the plan to fit within their environment and with what their staffing allows. Some of the successes that we've seen is that for the most part, we were able to have, you know, less interruptions to our students' education progress and their learning environment than what was being done in our community schools, just by the nature of our environment. We could do it more safely, had more control, obviously, over who is coming in and out of the facility, and we had screening procedures in place. But unfortunately, it just got to a point to where we had to make sure that we were limiting the number of staff because of what our data and our projections were showing for our state. But during this, we've also seen a lot more collaboration or increased collaboration between all the different sections, both at the central state level and definitely at the facility level, because there's a lot of folks who are being asked to do different things, and there are so many stepping forward to really meet the demands and the challenges of this situation, and showing a lot of initiative. And I think one of the successes would be, you know, some of our teachers are having an opportunity to learn or implement some of the new technologies where it is available and they can, utilize it, such as I referenced the Microsoft Teams. From what I'm hearing, what we're seeing is they're enjoying being able to implement and engage with these tools. And we're hoping, as we really start to develop and we see progress with our infrastructure, that we'll be able to continue the momentum we have with this and begin to implement them more in the future. We're also looking at new opportunities on how we're going to support our students as they're transitioning back to the community. As I'm sure a lot of other states are looking to again reduce the population in their sites. Trying to make sure that as they are transitioning to school, that they remain supported, and we're looking at trying to provide them devices as they're needed. Again, but even that leads into some of the challenges, with just how schools are enrolling or having to postpone enrollment at some of the local districts, lack of devices or connectivity at home, working around those issues as well. Existing shortages for staffing at the facilities continues to be an issue, but something that we're working through with the directors and everything at each site. And then obviously, as I said before, the lack of consistent technology access obviously has been a continued challenge for us, especially during this time. But we are looking at some low-tech opportunities, especially some tablets that come with preloaded content to help with some of our students, especially those who are in a mandatory quarantine or isolation situation. Next slide, please. So when we are looking at our serving our students with special needs, we continue to have our mental health providers on campus, and some of those may be contracted or using some telehealth presence, but we are following the guidelines, set by our Department of Public Instruction. EC teachers are working closely with the regular ed teachers to make sure that assignments are appropriate, and we're providing accommodations and adapting assignments as needed. They're continuing to check in with EC students, provide EC services as much as we can, as it's written within their IEP, making those modifications and documenting them as needed. Any IEPs meetings that we're holding, we're going to have to hold virtually, and our EC leadership by our EC director and EC instructional specialist. They've been doing some weekly check-ins with all of our EC teachers as well, just to make sure that they're being supported and they're receiving the most up-to-date information as it comes out from our Department of Public Instruction. Some of the lessons learned, one of the first things we learned, and this was, I think, holistically through juvenile justice, is that there were gaps in policies and some definitions that weren't as clear as what they could have been. And there was a lot of collaboration and communication between the executive leadership, the central management, making sure that we got the operational memos out, and so things could be more clearly defined, and we could be working as efficiently as possible during this time. And we know we're going to have to go back and address those once we get kind of past this whole situation. Communication and collaboration, it's critical. Definitely not a new idea, but I think it has definitely been reinforced through this situation. Again, both at the facility level and at the centralized level. Having daily meetings, with management, calls with our directors, and town halls at the facilities. Again, making sure that everybody's on the same page and clear on where things are heading and with the most updated information. And I think the last one is it's okay to do something different and try something different. You got to do the best you can with the situation and the resources that you have. And we're seeing a lot of folks become innovative, and again, it goes back to that communication and collaboration to make things work, especially during this time. And I think a lot of times through some of the conversations and things that we've implemented, we may find that what we're doing now may be less of a short-term solution and more of a long-term solution. So moving forward, we're going to continue to evaluate the status of our environments and try to get our education and our services back to normal for our kids and as quickly and as safely as we can, especially, just really relying on the data and the information we're getting from our health department and upper management leadership. We're going to continue to push the development of our IT infrastructure and build capacity for more of our digitally enhanced educational opportunities and really harness and develop our collaborative efforts and build from where we are now to support our new normal. So I want to hand it over now to Clarice Mendoza Davis, who is the Executive Director for the Maya Angelou Schools in Washington, D.C.
Thanks, Adam. Good afternoon, everyone. Like Adam said, I serve at the Maya Angelou Schools. We are an independent nonprofit that partners with the New Beginnings Youth Development Center in Washington, D.C. to operate the Maya Angelou Academy inside the New Beginnings facility in educating our post-adjudicated youth who are currently there. Our two previous colleagues spoke about their various instructional models, and at the Maya Angelou Academy in particular, we kind of have a hybrid of both models that we are in the process of implementing. Next slide, thank you. So both our teachers and our support staff started out engaging scholars in daily virtual teaching and learning through classrooms that we set up via Zoom. Our scholars actually came into the physical school classroom space and participated in our Zoom classrooms via the Promethean boards that we have in each of our rooms. And then students also worked in groups, partners, and independently to complete assignments and assessments, and also differentiated skill practice via the Chromebooks and other online learning applications that we have in place as part of our regular instructional program at Maya. We did modify our remote and virtual teaching and learning schedule each day to include 2 60-minute blocks of core subject instruction. So you can see in the graphic in the slide how we alternated English language arts and math on one day and science and social studies on the other day. We did really think it was important to give our teachers adequate planning time for our virtual lessons, as well as continued professional development and coaching. So we actually have a daily block for teachers and staff for that purpose. And then at the end of every day, we have a staff circle up to debrief on what went well during virtual instruction in our classrooms and what we want to change or adjust to make the next day even better. Quite early on in our implementation of remote learning, we did have several scholars who tested positive, and so they were in quarantine, and we went ahead and created differentiated learning packets for them, a week's worth of instructional materials, content and skill practice that we have since been collecting and then providing updated instructional materials for them. So in terms of successes for this first part of our virtual teaching and learning, we found that there were such high levels of scholar engagement and participation in Zoom classrooms. I think scholars were very much aware of what was happening in the outside world and what their peers outside of the facility were experiencing in terms of school, and they were happy to continue to engage in teaching and learning on a regular basis. We do have a remote desktop app that allows not only teachers, but also other staff and school leadership to monitor scholar productivity on Chromebooks and support students that need individual help. So if a student became stuck or we noticed that they were idle for a little bit, we weren't able to necessarily walk around the classroom, obviously, and tap them on the shoulder, but we were able to make sure that we connected with that scholar via the remote app to make sure that they had the support that they needed. We also were really excited that our scholars who were in quarantine did take advantage of the choices, learning choices that we offered with our student packets. And so for an example, a few of our scholars actually chose to participate in our annual My Angelo essay contest, which was really exciting that they opted in. Next slide. So the hybrid part of our instructional approach comes in with the fact that we actually had a few more scholars who unfortunately test positive for COVID-19, as well as a couple of New Beginning staff too. And with that, all scholars, instead of being able to come physically to the school space at New Beginnings, all of our scholars have had to remain on the unit without access to technology and virtual instruction. And so we've switched to differentiated learning packets for all of our students. And so while we are meeting students where they are at in terms of their academic needs, it's definitely more challenging to assess daily student progress and provide the spot support that we were able to when we were doing virtual teaching on a daily basis. Regarding our exceptional learners at the My Angelo Academy, co-teachers and other support staff and school leadership pushed into our Zoom classrooms regularly, so they had the opportunity to support students and connect with our exceptional learners in that way. Of course, Zoom and also Google Hangout, which was another application we used, allowed for one-on-one academic support too. We do at our school have our own social work who have continued to provide counseling and other mental health and social emotional support to our scholars via Zoom. We were able to modify our instructional packets according to the needs of our exceptional learners and what was designated in their IEPs. And so even though we are now in packet mode only at this point, fortunately, we've been able to have New Beginnings' own social worker make sure to provide continued services to our exceptional learners and other scholars while on the unit. In terms of lessons learned, as I reflected with our school leadership team and our teachers and staff at the My Angelo Academy, we learned pretty early on that we made some assumptions about staff and students' comfort level with remote learning and their capacity for remote learning. And so there was a lot of spot support for not only students, but also teachers and staff as they practiced becoming more familiar with virtual teaching and learning, facilitating and directing student learning and scholar discussions, and encouraging student participation and managing learning from a distance. So we were able to troubleshoot some of those assumptions that we had made early on, and we had fortunately a great IT team who helped provide support with our Zoom logistics, et cetera, throughout the first week of implementation. Moving forward, for as long as the scholars are on the unit, our team at My Angelo will continue to diligently print and compile and drop off and pick up our instructional packets weekly. We will continue to partner with our colleagues at New Beginning to ensure that while on the unit, there's a daily period of learning time that's dedicated for students to work on their packets either together or independently. And then, of course, as soon as we are able, we will definitely resume our virtual instruction via Zoom classrooms when scholars are able to come back to the unit. And we're hoping that that is very soon. With that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Woody Clifton.
Hi, good afternoon, and thank you, Clarice. I appreciate that. My name is Woody Clifton. I'm the director of the DYS Education Initiative with the Collaborative for Educational Services. And our agency is contracted by Massachusetts Department of Youth Services to provide education to youth and DYS across the state and to support their transition in, through, and back to their home communities. The focus of this section of the presentation is, as David said earlier, is on how we have sought to balance kind of providing for the remote learning needs of youth in DYS care now, while also strengthening the knowledge and skills of our workforce to be better and to better meet the needs of youth in the future. Before I go on, I'd be remiss not to express my gratitude to CJJA for the leadership of Commissioner Forbes here in Massachusetts and his executive team, statewide and regional leadership of the department, our partners, our workforce, and perhaps most of all, I want to give a shout out to the program staff who are really heroes in keeping our youth safe and supporting continued access to academic enrichment during this truly extraordinary time. Next slide, please. With regards to planning, we determined early on that we needed to recognize the differences that exist across programs, across the population, across our workforce, that not all teachers, students, program staff, et cetera, would be in the same place in terms of readiness or proficiency to pivot to remote learning. We recognize that technology, be it hardware and or access to internet, would be different across different programs, and that the conditions in programs were likely to change on a moment-to-moment basis in light of some of the health and safety concerns that would emerge. We therefore dedicated ourselves to making decisions focused on the end in mind, really ultimately how do we make sure that what we do now will result in better programming when we return to face-to-face instruction. And that meant how do we pivot with 200 plus educators to become, at least for us, more proficient in delivering blended learning experiences with youth and use Google Classroom. We've made some progress over the years in introducing Google Classroom and blended learning, but this situation presents an opportunity for us to really make significant strides in progress in that regard. We wanted to build on past efforts and infrastructure. So for example, here in Massachusetts, with 40 programs distributed across the state, and the state recognizing the importance of professional development and training of its teaching workforce, we have instructional coaches that work with maybe 20 to 30 educators in each region, and two instructional technology coaches that support technology use across the state in education. And without this workforce, we would never have been able to pivot as quickly as we did to remote learning and largely Google Classroom. So we had to build on past efforts, and then we had to design an approach that was iterative and agile, which basically means lots and lots of communication from grass bottoms to grass tops across the regions, and to constantly be asking how's it going and collecting feedback on how's it going to inform changes along the way. The focus that I wanted to pay attention to during this section is our teacher training and PD effort. And at the core of that effort over the last 5 weeks has been what we called just-in-time playlist strategy. And I've attached a handout of what that looks like. This is a Friday example of one of our daily playlists. And these playlists were generated every day to based on feedback from the field and with a focus on where we were going down the road. And they were organized around three main ideas. The first one is explore, and exploration was a time for teachers to really gain background knowledge about key ideas or skills or concepts or tools. We had another section or focus area which is on structured learning, and this would include webinars that our coaches would facilitate, 45-minute discrete webinars or so, as well as mandated trainings around certain themes, for instance, accessibility to Google Classroom, and personalized learning support through office hours with coaches. And then the third kind of main idea is around sharing. So at the end of every day, teachers would gather in their education teams for each program, and they would discuss, what did they learn today? What was their takeaway? They would share that takeaway with their peers, and then they would submit what we called a exit ticket. And exit tickets were all aggregated into a spreadsheet using Google Sheets, and we reviewed that teacher feedback on a daily basis, and that informed all of the future trainings from day to day, as well as going forward. The playlists were designed to be differentiated to the wide range of learning needs of the workforce. It was important for us to provide voice and choice in these playlists, that there was a combination of being self-directed and directed, and that it could draw on teacher expertise and coaching expertise. These are truly hallmarks of blended learning activities. And in light of that, we also wanted to model expectations through our training system. And this playlist is created on a hyperdoc, and hyperdocs again are pretty ubiquitous in terms of what you would see in a blended learning classroom. And we wanted teachers to see and experience how certain tools and apps could be used by using them ourselves on a day-to-day basis. I will say that this has been a little bit like drinking water out of a fire hose this period when you're doing a playlist day-to-day. So we are now moving towards a weekly and then hopefully a 2-week schedule, depending on how long this goes. One of the third key elements that I wanted to emphasize is that it's important to find ways for educators to maintain connections. And by doing so, we could both create accountability to one another, as well as counter the sense of isolation that can occur during this period. And, that can include certain silly competitions, like we did a Funky Footwear Friday, and teachers would submit their picks, and we created a virtual gallery, and then they weighed in on it. But this importance of maintaining culture and compassion during this period, even through remote learning, has been really helpful, and I don't want to understate its importance. So as we move forward, we are now in this piloting and testing possibilities stage. I mean, in the past 5 weeks, we've rolled out a layered and staggered approach. It has ultimately resulted in addition to the foundational enrichment packets, we now have about 60% or so of our programs using Google Classroom. We've built over 100 Google Classrooms across the state, and expect to pilot more synchronous opportunities between teachers and students going forward. We also are expecting to expand access to Google Classroom, possibly in residential space. We have some instances where students can't get into the education wing just due to movement concerns and health and safety, and we are exploring how to expand access to the residential space. That would be a big step in a direction that we never thought possible. We're taking risks, and we're being as smart as we can about it. And then the last thing I wanted to highlight is the importance of documentation in this process, both so that we can learn from what we've done and implement the best practices when we get back, but as well to just document communication between teachers and students. And if you're using Google Classroom, those interactions and those supports become exemplars for future rollout of Google Classroom when we return to face-to-face, and also are maintained in perpetuity. So in essence, this effort will, depending on when it ends, will make it so that our teachers are much more acutely prepared to support engaging 21st century blended learning opportunities for young people when we get back to face-to-face opportunity teaching. And with that, I want to thank you for your time. I hope it was useful, and I will hand it over to my colleagues and friends down in New Orleans, Christy and Michelle.
Hi, everyone. I'm Christy Sampson-Kelly. I serve as the Director of Schools for Travis Hill. I was going to be joined by Deshelle Williams, and she's been called away, as this often happens inside of our facilities where I'm calling from right now. But I'm going to go ahead and take it over and hope she can get back in here before we wrap up. We can go to the next slide. Thank you. I'm going to talk a little bit about system-level coordination, specifically in supporting transition and school placement for young people who are leaving us during this time. So on that topic, the coordination that we really looked at were across 3 entities, CEAS, which Travis Hill falls under, our organization, the City of New Orleans, and then also New Orleans Public Schools. At our school, we do have 2 campuses. We have one school in the adult jail and one school in the Juvenile Justice Intervention Center, which is what I'm going to talk about. One of the things we did in terms of on the facility level is we did install access points on all of the living units. So there was one living unit that was pretty close to the school building, so we didn't have to do it on that one. That was one of the newer pods, but we did install access points and get access for kids to get onto Wi-Fi on their living units. We also distributed technology, and that was really done jointly. We already had Chromebooks as part of our educational program that we generally do with students, but now those Chromebooks and those Chromebook carts are being housed in the supervisor's offices on the living units where they're charged and they stay there. And then every morning those are distributed by the JDCs, juvenile detention counselors. They come and pick up the Chromebooks for the students on their unit and their headphones and their accompanying paper packets, if some of those have those. Those are more limited now, although we did start with all paper, and they get set up for class. Our counseling and also related services right now, which is only speech language, is done through video conferencing on those Chromebooks as well, and with some phone calls. We did need to do a little bit more coordination just around space because those counseling calls do need to be private, so we do have a private office where our students are able to speak to their social workers. The other really kind of new thing and really exciting thing that I think we were able to do was to ensure that when young people are released, they leave with a Chromebook. So those Chromebooks, and I'll talk about this a little bit more when we move down to the school district coordination, but those Chromebooks were provided by the school district, and we ensure that each young person leaves with a Chromebook and that they are either reconnected with their community school, which right now is pretty rare, although we did have a few young people who were able to be reconnected. The vast majority of young people are remaining on our roster with Travis Hill, so I'll talk about that on the next kind of bullet section. In terms of the coordination between our school and the New Orleans Public Schools, it was an amazing partnership. New Orleans Public Schools purchased 10,000 Chromebooks for the children of the city of New Orleans and distributed those to each of the school sites. We were one of those sites, and we received some Chromebooks that were already set up and ready to go for young people. And as they leave the facility, they are either, again, like I said, reconnected with their community school. And out of the 20 young people who have left so far, we have 3 that have been reconnected with their community school. The rest of those students are actually remaining as Travis Hill students. And that Chromebook was then configured jointly between New Orleans Public Schools and also our technology person, where he made sure that although young people are attached to our Travis Hill console, they have remote access on a separate organizational unit. So of course it makes it so that that young person in the community isn't able to communicate with young people that are held in the facility. So it's a safe space for them. And for students that did return to their prior school, although we're coordinating the Chromebooks for them, we are in close contact with the school to make sure those young people remain on track and are all set up. Related to the next kind of level of coordination was really with the city. And the city took the lead on this, but we were able to collaborate around, I think, our most kind of opportunity use. We were finding that many young people and their families do not have internet connectivity, so we partnered with a local internet service provider to provide free access. And that has worked probably, it's coming along. It's still a little bit difficult because we had all of these other hurdles that no one thought of, such as, there's an overdue bill and what do we do here? But I think that we're in a good place. And between that and the fact that the New Orleans Public Schools also ordered some MiFi connectivity, so we are able to pass those out, although those are quite limited. And I think we underestimated the amount of households that did not already have Wi-Fi connection. When I think about these 3 levels of partnerships that we did, I think there are 2 things that are most exciting to me personally. I think one was getting the Wi-Fi on the living units, and also just the collaboration with the JDCs and the shift supervisor to make sure that school continued to happen, and just the enthusiasm from young people and they're really giving it a try. So we right now, because of that, are able to have young people in Google Classrooms where they're consistently attending. They have access, and it's working out. The other part of this that's exciting to me is us being able to hold on to young people after they leave during this time. It's just it's a very trying time for all of us, and just knowing that we can continue to support our students in the community who through connection to Travis Hill School, and also ensure that they're still making progress at least through the end of the school year. That is how long we're going to hold on to them. And we just can continue to provide them with that support while they're not here. And that also looks like there's also a level of collaboration with families that I think didn't have a bullet, but in retrospect, I wish did. Because I think that our collaboration with families in terms of getting kids what they need and giving families the support to do this is a really big leap for households that have multiple children and multiple schools and multiple devices or not. So I'm pretty grateful that we were able to make all of this happen. There is the one image that you see at the very bottom. That is a link to what it looks like. It's called our one sheet in terms of a young person leaving and all of the steps that need to happen to make sure that they not only get their Chromebook, but are connected with Wi-Fi, enrolled in their school, all of the different people that need to talk to one another. When we broke it down, it was a pretty daunting task, but I think that we're doing pretty well now, and all of our kids are connected. And the last thing that we needed to do that wasn't something that we originally thought of is we did need to add a COVID-19 inclusion to our student confidentiality process, just to make sure that teachers and families are aware of how all of this works, and when young people are home, to make sure that we're still protecting student confidentiality in places where there are lots of people around. And at that, I'd like to I think I'm turning it over now for some concluding comments.
Thanks, Christy. Thanks, everybody. Let me just try to do a couple quick comments and then try to address a few of the questions that have come through. I might have to do that a little generally just due to the time constraints here. But I think some takeaways here, now more than ever is the time when the custodial care and the education teams really must and can work together. I think one common theme that you heard from these presentations is that where this can work, it's working because the secure care and the education teams are really working together. I think this is a real chance for all of us to even do more of that and have more honest conversations again about staffing and essential workers and expectations, and all of this can really help us as things change and or if we confront situations like this going forward. Many secure care staff, the custodial staff, has just done incredible work at so many places to help the education teams. The next bullet point, again, which you really hear from Christy, agency leadership. This is, again, a real time to be in conversation with school district superintendents, with state offices of education. I've been participating, for example, on a weekly call that the state of Nebraska Secretary of Education has, where he's coordinating transition from all the secure care sites back to schools in the whole state. But in many places, there's a huge gap here. We didn't get a chance to talk about that, but we really need our agency leadership to be talking with secure care, to be talking with state and local school officials. Kids otherwise are going to get released and just go back to nothing for the spring and the summer. The next bullet point, there are real concerns about needing to put kids into small rooms and keep them in careful places for periods of time and quarantine young people. But as things get better, again, let's use this as a launch pad to figure out improved practices going forward, not as any sort of excuses for inaction. You just heard an example about putting even technology onto the units and internet access points that can be turned on and off in ways that keep things secure. So there's a lot of great stuff that's happening here that we can use to make this work even better going forward. And the last one that you heard both, I think, from all of the presenters who are working day to day, and from Woody and his conversation about what to do going forward. As we all know in our own lives, there's no switch that's just going to get flipped here and life's going to go totally back to normal. This is the time just to be thinking and working right now about technology access and technology capacity on the custodial care side, on the infrastructure side, and with teacher training. Now's the time to start learning, training, making plans, testing things out so that over the spring and the summer, we can continue to innovate and continue to do better by our students. This is, again, really a watershed moment for us to try to come together around these things and define our roles and work together in service of young people. We only have about 3 minutes, so I think as far as questions fall into 3 categories really here, and I'll just address them and let people know we'll do our best on these. A number of questions came in, not surprising, about security with the Chromebooks, about what tools we're using to manage access, limit kids' ability to get to sort of the wrong places. Our team, Kat Crawford on our team, Dan Wynn, people on the Travis Hill staff, people on Woody's staff can all help on that, and I think we can consolidate and post some basic answers, and then if need be, have people get together on more specific questions there. Other people asked, again, about relationships with local school districts. Again, I think we can get some information back to people on transferring kids back and transfer of records. I will pledge to work with a CJJA team to get through all the questions and, like I said, categorize them and get quick responses posted. Since I think that we're about 1 minute out and I need to turn it back over to Mike Dempsey. As I do that, or before I do that, I want to really thank Charity from his team for helping to make this all possible, for supporting the technology, and for working with us.
All right. Thank you, David. And thanks to all our presenters for all the wonderful information that they provided to everybody. I want to thank all our attendees as well. We had a really good outcome. Close to 500 people, I think, were on the webinar for today. So thank you all for that very much. You will all receive an email. If everyone who registered for the webinar, whether you attended or not, you'll get an email from us with a link to a recorded version of the webinar. You'll also get links to any of the attachments and additional resources. As David said, he'll put together a quick response to some of the questions, so we'll make that available to everyone as well. As you close out of the webinar, you will get a very quick, short survey that will pop up. If you would, please take the time to complete the survey as well, so that we can figure out how we can better serve everyone in juvenile justice system and the kids who are entrusted to our care. So with that, thank you all very much, and hope you all have a safe and healthy rest of the week.